Hello folks and welcome to today's live OurGame show with myself, Shane Stapleton, Michael Verney, and we're joined by a fairly happy Clare man, Colin Ryan. We're brought to you by ogreretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame to get 15% off. Colin, we'll just go straight to it. Clare are back, aren't they?
I don't know about that, but it's just it was I suppose after the disappointment and frustration of last week, I actually was only talking to John during the week, and I was kind of like there wasn't really a better fixture that they could have had, to redeem themselves after it, because if it had been Cork or Waterford, there would have been serious pressure on them, to get a result, and obviously with Limerick coming down the line, but with Limerick it kind of felt like it was a bit of a shot to nothing, but at the same time, Clare, I suppose they feel like they can match up to this Limerick side. And give it to them, I suppose, physically, but also have the legs for them. So I think it was just a good fixture for them. I think to focus the mind straight away again after the disappointment of Tipperary last week, because I actually felt they didn't really hurl that badly against Tipperary. But obviously, when you give them, a 9-point lead early in the game, you're going to struggle to get that back in any shape or form. And I think when they look back in the Tip game, it probably wasn't the mistakes. I actually think they'll be most frustrated with the fact that they didn't put pressure on them straight after half-time, and really kick on after gaining the momentum. They kind of, they allowed Tipperary get the puck out and, easily work the ball up the field, and Tip will cause damage, if you're not going to do that. And I think that's what probably frustrated them more than the mistakes.
Yeah, so it finished, for anyone who was under a rock for the weekend, Limerick 220, Clare 124. So a great 1-point victory for the banner there. And so John Conlon gave an exhibition. I think he's 34 now. You were saying you met him during the week. Absolutely brilliant performance at centre back. But he goes back to his brother's wedding then after, already been there during the day. Surely the bride's going to be fairly put out seeing this lad walking in and he's the talk of the country.
No, if you knew John's family, you'd have to accept the fact that they're hurling mad. It's not, they're real genuine people. I've nearly known them all my life. I was in school with John in Flannans, obviously, and he was a year younger than me, but they're just, even Pa, his brother is hurling mad. He looks up to John. He'd have absolutely no problem now with John coming in, and John is so unassuming too. That he'd arrive into that wedding and he'd probably want the focus to be straight back on. He wouldn't worry about it, or be gloating, or he'd nearly be want to crawl in under a rock, I'd say, than to talk about it. But he definitely was in good form, I'd say, going back there. And obviously it probably set the wedding off. I actually had a different experience in the Munster final last year. We were at a wedding of a friend of mine. And the whole wedding was held up for extra time and everything, because there were two hurling people, and obviously we had the disappointment then of losing that day. So it was a bit different, but it brings a different form of excitement, and it's a memory I suppose they'll have, long after I suppose the things have settled down.
I was going to say long after the divorce, but I'm only joking. I wish them the best. Michael, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, just a word on John Conlon. Jesus Christ, for a lad to have played wing forward, full forward all his life and go back, and he just was controlling affairs the other night. His positioning is unbelievable, but even just getting in the face of the Limerick lads, it was an unbelievable performance from him. Even just to lead the line the way he did. Yeah,
he I suppose the mark of the man was when he did his bad injury there a couple of years back, that he went off and did an S&C course. He's a primary school teacher, but he got qualified in S&C while he was doing it. He's just a real driven fella, but I think his game intelligence and his calmness. Listen, I'm not comparing him to Declan Hannon quite yet. I think Declan Hannon has been absolutely a phenomenal leader for Limerick and has made that sixth role, great for his team. But John kind of has that same calming influence, I think, over this Clare team. I think when you missed him in the All-Ireland semi-final last year, I think that's when you realise maybe, what you're missing. I would go as far to say as it will take a lot. We've been struggling to replace him, even in some of the earlier rounds of the league when he takes a break. you know, we don't have a six like that who's a calming influence. And it might be something that, you know, Tony Kelly might finish out his career there, you know, like in that kind of calming role where, you know, you might kind of see that. But it's a fierce important role at the minute, because there's carnage around you, you know, in the back line now at the minute, because teams are being dragged everywhere. And to have a six that knows how to play the role, you know, knows when to go, but also, you know, can deliver the ball and talk and communicate around him. Like, you look at Tyke de Burka, you know, unfortunate injury last week, and you realise how important he is to the Waterford setup, and they just can't be replaced.
Certainly not. Hurling 1234 says, hi guys, interesting stat. Limerick have got 7 points and 8 points from playing their last 2 games. They had 3 from play by half time on Saturday night. Mark Lynch says, as a Clare man, I'm delighted. However, I still think Limerick will win Munster and the All-Ireland. And he also says, you can see John Conlon's farm in Clonlara from Niall Moran's across the Shannon and Castle Connell. Yeah, and are you still teaching in Limerick, Colin?
Yeah. So it's nice. It's nice to go in tomorrow now, right?
You'd nearly take the bank holiday off to go in today just to get the extra 24 hours of gloating, I'd say.
No, we're not like that, because I suppose we haven't won All-Ireland yet, but it will be nice. It will be nice. They're just, you know, like, it's been a long time coming, you know, to go in and actually feel like. But I think they're a bit rattled. I think they're a small bit rattled after, like, you know, the Waterford game last week. I think they thought like that they'd put it up to Waterford, and obviously, you know, so I think they're a bit worried that, you know, they've the hotels booked for July, you know, and August. They'll be looking to see what the cancellation policy is on that. You know, they're not quite there yet, but they're definitely, you know, a small bit rattled.
Wasn't it Jurgen Klopp who said after the Champions League final last year, book your hotels for the Champions League final next year? And of course, there he is. Michael Verney was wondering, could we shoehorn in Jurgen Klopp doing his hamstring yesterday when he was celebrating? We've managed it. Yeah. What else was there was something in particular I was going to say there to you, Colin. Is it Pallaskenry that? So basically, it's Kyle Hayes' parish that you're teaching in, is it?
Yeah. Kyle though didn't go to school with us, but yeah, it's the same parish. Yeah.
So that place has had a big surge in terms of their hurling in the last few years, hasn't it?
Yeah, Kildima Pallaskenry is like, they've done phenomenal work at underage. You know, we've been lucky, I suppose. We don't really like our stronghold is Kildima Pallaskenry. We get some from Ballybrown, but I suppose the real hurlers at coming in first year would probably hit into Ardskull. So like we're very lucky that they're doing some phenomenal work in Kildima Pallaskenry. So we're reaping the benefits outside in school. You know, we were in the Munster C final this year under 19. Like, we lost by a point, you know, unfortunately in the Munster final, but just it's nice to have a bit of success at school level. David Fitzgerald there, who's playing wing back for the Limerick 20s, is inside with us, you know, so it's nice to kind of have a little I suppose a bit of inter-county experience around it. We've a good few footballers as well, you know. We had a couple of lads on the Limerick 20 footballers. We've the goalie for the Limerick minor hurlers. You know, a couple of lads on the panel and the Limerick minor footballers. So, like, you know, it's all down to the work that they're doing in Kildima Pallaskenry. You know, they're really getting a foothold, and obviously they're a senior hurling and a senior football club now at the minute. So, you know, for quite a small place, you know, they're having a lot of success, and they're, you know, really driven, and there's a great group of lads coming through there.
Michael, did you ever think that Shane O'Donnell would become a battering ram, ball winning half forward?
It's unbelievable. No, I didn't. And I kind of gotten the talk was that, you know, he was going to be back for last year's championship, and he was after bulking up significantly. And he's so dangerous out around there. And I suppose maybe there was a fair element of freedom as well, because he was playing that kind of tankless inside role for so long. It's just amazing, Shane, when you think about it. Like, he didn't play league this year. He didn't play league last year. You know, TJ Reid didn't play a league this year. Stephen Cluxton didn't play anything and was retired. All these guys that haven't played league and are all of a sudden having such a big play in the championship. It's bonkers, really. You wouldn't have predicted a lot of it anyway.
Yeah, Colin, will you talk to us about the first time you had Shane O'Donnell on the panel? Obviously, we all know what he did with the hat-trick, but like the player then versus the player now.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it there though. Like, you know, he's bulked up something unreal. You know, when Shane came on the scene, like, he was a real athletic. He was agile, but he was quite slender. You know, like he was that kind of rangy, arms and legs everywhere. But like, he knew he was in control of them. You know, but like, you know, we didn't kind of know what was going to happen next. You know, he was phenomenal. But like, I think what people are starting to see now, and we saw from a very early age, like, is his ball winning ability. You know, like he can go up in the middle of a big group and just like hurry up and flick it down. But also when it goes to ground, he seems to have this ability that I can only remember Dan Shanahan having, where like, you know, he can get his hand on a ball like real low down. You know, if it drops and bounces, like he just seems to be able to just get his hand on it quicker than most people. And once he has the ball in his hand, then his intelligence is just phenomenal. I actually think it's because of that then that he's able to bring in the likes of, you know, David Fitz and Tony around him. You know, he's a dream to play with. I've said this numerous times because Shane doesn't think about, you know, headlines or scores or, you know, he just seems to make the right decision all the time. But that springs, I suppose, from his intelligence, I suppose, off the field as well as on the field. You know, he's a real bright guy, and for the young lads to see Shane O'Donnell and have him around is absolutely brilliant. You know, I think if he arrived on the first day before the Munster Championship, I'd start him. You know, I don't think it would make a difference what he's done because he looks after himself so well. And he just seems to have that ability to just switch it on when he needs to. He doesn't need, you know, a phenomenal amount of game time to get him up to speed again, especially maybe when he hasn't been injured and stuff like that and he's looking after himself.
But no one could do, Shane. He went to Harvard. He went to Harvard in 2019, came back and was man of the match in the first round against Waterford down in Walsh Park. He was unbelievable the other night. He's quiet by his standards, maybe the first day out against Tip. Last year he did his best championship ever, having not played league. Like, that's freaky kind of territory. Like, that's a bit of a freak of a player that can actually go and do that type of thing.
Yeah, I remember interviewing him several years ago and asking him what he was into outside of hurling, and he said this video game called Dota, which I've never played, don't know what it's about, but anyway, I'd say he's a sort of a cool enough type of dude. But Colin, do you reckon from a Limerick point of view, it's kind of worrying that we were told, you know, they've kind of been doing a load of work behind the scenes, you know, big pre-season block, all this kind of stuff, won the league anyway. But in their first game, Declan Hannon's off injured after 13 minutes. Apparently it's a groin, and yet he plays a full match a week later and he seems okay. And then Sean Finn and Cian Lynch are injured during this game as well. So, like, have they timed this right? Is the 4 games going to catch out anybody? Like, where do you think Limerick are at? Because they weren't exactly brilliant against Waterford last week.
No, and I suppose you're trying to manage how the season works out. I suppose John would have, like, when they really looked at last year's season, they felt like they were undercooked a small bit in the Munster Championship and were probably lucky to kind of get through, you know, an odd game and an odd mistake. But they built their way up, obviously, to an All-Ireland semi-final, and Gearóid Hegarty was, like, you know, he just seemed to come on as the year went on. You know, and they kind of got better and stuff like that. But I think what you don't realise, though, is the amount of miles, like, on the clock for these lads. Like, you know, that they have been going non-stop now, you know, and through their own success. You know, and every team wants to take them down and physically wants to go at them. And they seem to have marred, I suppose, the idea of being physical but also being fit, you know, and being able to get around the pitch and stuff like that. But sometimes when, like, other teams are trying to take a team like Limerick down, no more than, you know, trying to take Kilkenny down. And I suppose that's, you know, but Kilkenny played a very different game. You know, Kilkenny was, you know, man on man, you know, you stayed in your position, you won your ball, you know, and then you moved. But the amount of miles that these Limerick lads are covering, you know, the last couple of years and the way they play, like, they're going to have to get an injection of somebody to come in. And obviously Cathal O'Neill has come in, but, like, they've tried a lot of lads this year, but the team that was named for the first round of the Munster Championship was the very same team that nearly won their All-Ireland, you know, 5 years ago. So, like, they're trying to find new blood, but this is a generational type of a group that just, you know, have come along together and they've been so good that it's very hard to replace them. But it is going to catch up with some of them at, you know, I suppose, I won't say sooner rather than later, but at some point it is going to catch up with them, and it's going to be up to some team to have the hunger and the willingness to go at them, I suppose, to really, you know, to influence that and to get a result out of a game. But it is unusual to see that amount of injuries, like especially Cian Lynch, for instance, like, who's had a couple of them now the last couple of years. And you can see that he's bulked up a lot, but I wonder, has that, you know, sacrificed maybe his agility and his ability to move around the place, because he's a different player to what he was, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, like when he was midfield and he was going everywhere and he was very mobile. He's gone very, very, you know, he's bulked up a lot, you know, physically wise, but it's hard to know whether that's going to, you know, or that hasn't made an influence on his body then. Yeah,
Michael, like, this is the first time that Limerick have been beaten in the championship since 2019 and the first home defeat since earlier in that season against Cork. So, like, I don't know, are Limerick in any way in trouble here, or are we still expecting them to waltz out of the group?
No, it definitely won't be waltzing out of the group anyway. And they're definitely in a bit of trouble. Like, if you look at that game in 2019 against Cork, Cork came down to the Gaelic grounds, having been beaten by, I think we were beaten by Tip the week before, I think. Limerick were put on the back foot straight away. They reacted quite well. Still lost the Tip in that last group game. You can say it didn't mean anything. Then they produced an unbelievable performance in the All-Ireland semi-final, in the Munster final. And I think they're going to waltz the All-Ireland, and Kilkenny caught them in the semi-final. So when they've been beaten, there's usually been signs there that they're going to be beaten. So there's no point in saying any different. It's two bad performances in a row. They haven't, clocked the type of, digits they'd like, usually up around the 30 mark. What were they? It was 22. Was it? No, 21 the first week. It was 221 the other day, which is a good bit higher, but they still left, I think they left 14 wides behind them. Well, I just say as well, most Tipperary people must have got a good kick out of somebody playing against Limerick and actually playing for two halves. It's been a while, like, you're used to kind of yourselves, you throw it down for maybe 35-40 minutes, but it was refreshing to see a team actually go at them for two halves the other night. Go on, Shano, you surely want to come in.
Well, I mean, it's true, Tipperary have faded big time in those matches. Like, Colin, the big talk in the last few years has been this third quarter from Limerick, and can teams sort of survive with them? Tipperary, perfect example of a team that can't. But this was 2 weeks in a row that expected Limerick burst just did not happen. So, like, have teams worked them out, or is it an energy thing?
There's a bit of both. I think, I think what teams have realised, though, is that you can't give Limerick, an easy ball and let them work the ball out the field. I think Clare are really good at going man for man. I think they're back. And now we've been blessed, I suppose, with the, Adam Hogan coming along this year, who's a real teak tough, man marker as a cornerback, and obviously having Rory Hayes, who has legs on him as well. Like, it is down to, your ability to be able to match up against these players, and then having Diarmuid Ryan and Dave McInerney, I suppose, at half-back, who are able to follow players up the field. And you could see a marked difference there the other day, like that Cathal O'Neill came short for a puck out, and David McInerney was right up behind him, like that there wasn't that even level of, like, we're going to let Limerick win the ball in their own half and let them move up along the field. I think, Joe Canning had it right there recently when he said, like, that the only way you're going to beat this Limerick team is to get fit enough to go man for man with them, and to be able to you can't give them a +1. You can't give this Limerick team a +1, and especially now, when they're a bit off, if you give them a +1, you're giving them an out, and I suppose the big difference between Waterford and Clare was possibly, their efficiency in front of goal. I think Waterford had been a bit more efficient in front of goal. They had a lot of bad wides the first day, and possibly a belief thing with Waterford. I think maybe, that they didn't really have the belief that they could have gone and won that game, because they've had a lot of scarring in recent years, I suppose, in the Munster Championship, whereas Clare are coming off, knowing that they can match up against Limerick, and they kind of felt like, they had the hurt of the week before and everything else, and they had the legs in them. But still, like, it's a sign of a great team, Limerick, that even after it all, Clare still only win by a point, so, like, it's going to be up to Tip and Cork. Like, the way I look at it is, you can't give Limerick chances. You can't give them, like, they're like a cat with 9 lives. They just come good around All-Ireland time. Like, I would say it's up to Tip and Cork now to knock them out, because I think now is the time to get them, when they're vulnerable, and when, you don't want them getting out of Munster and getting into, like, the perfect scenario for Limerick might be, coming third in Munster, and going on that route where you kind of build up another couple of games and win them handily, get to an All-Ireland semi-final, and suddenly they're kicking into gear, so, like, now is the time, for Tip and Cork to go at them. And I think, Tip will look at it as a great opportunity, like, to test where they're at, I suppose, and Liam Cahill will, I think, cherish that, I think, to go up against them and to have a cut at them.
And I'd say Brian Lohan will cherish the opportunity to knock Davy Fitz completely out of the championship, but we'll come to that later on. Obviously, Waterford struggling at the moment. Ryan Loftus says Ryan Taylor still very underrated. When he plays well, Clare go well. Like, he's unreal. I think he should have been an All-Star last year. Detox 101. I see all the Clare fellas celebrating outside on the field. You'd swear they won the All-Ireland and the tidy towns and the set dance, and fair play to them, but they have Davy and Liam Cahill to come next. Derek Lynch of Clare FM says, good morning, gents. What a great bank holiday Monday. Monday mornings. Hope you're well, Shane. Just there wasn't quite as much out of him when I was down at Cusack Park last week. He was saying hello to me on the way in. I didn't see him on the way out. But
it's a bad job when Tip aren't playing and you still get a cut, Shane. Like, you know.
yeah.
Bad job or a good job.
Yeah. Colin, do you feel like last year the cobwebs of, well, whatever you want to say about the Kilkenny performance and now even the Tipperary performance, conceded 5 goals was fairly bad now. But do you think that it's all kind of full steam ahead now for Clare, that you feel like the All-Ireland tilt is back on the menu here?
Yeah, I like, listen, it'll be as far removed now for Brian Lohan's head winning All-Ireland now as, like, you know, they're going to be concentrating on, you know, obviously Waterford next, and like there's a massive opportunity there. Like, you know, you're looking at 4 points it'll be scoring difference, 4 points. You know, one team is going to get knocked out, but like Clare are going to be looking at that and going, like, you know, if we can get to 6 and get 2 wins. But Cork were flying last night, you know, like, and you don't want to be going into the last round, you know, having to beat Cork. I suppose the plus that you're in Cusack Park, but you know, you want to beat Waterford. You just don't know how Waterford are going to react, I suppose, after their 2 losses. Davey will have them up for it, I'm sure, but Clare will be just looking at that Waterford game and trying to get a performance, and maybe, you know, feeding into the doubts maybe that Waterford would have, getting on top of them, you know, getting a result there, no matter what happens, getting a result there, get onto 4 points. But like you were just saying there about Ryan Taylor, like what a player. Like, you know, I felt that when Davy Fitz was missing against Tipperary, we were short on that one player who, like, we're full of energy. Like, what Clare have been really good at in recent years is when we've played our best hurling is when Ryan Taylor, David Fitz, Tony Kelly, Cathal Malone are all coming back into our half back line and carrying ball, you know, and carrying ball out the field, you know, at pace. And when you're short an option on that, and I thought when we were short David Fitzgerald, you know, against Tipperary, we were short a man to be able to do that, because that is a real high energy game. You know, like that if Ryan Taylor needs a break, Davy Fitz does it. You know, if Davy Fitz need a break, then Cathal Malone goes back and does it. You know, like you need bodies there to be able to do that constantly. And it also, what people didn't realise is it allowed then like Peter Duggan to be able to position on the edge of the square, and like Peter obviously, like, you know, arms and legs, he's like Spider-Man, you know, for the second goal, you know, like Peter's just a nuisance. And I think he'd be the first to say, like, that maybe, you know, out around the middle of the pitch where the pace of the game is got an awful lot quicker now, he possibly struggles. But having him on the edge of the square there, you know, and causing absolute carnage, you know, and like the first goal, like the first chance he had, you know, came out of nothing as well. And obviously Nicky Quaid had a great save, you know, tipping it over the bar. But like the addition of Aidan McCarthy and Mark Rogers and all these players, like you know, we've been very fortunate in recent years that we just have developed a group of players that are very, very athletic. They're very bright, you know, intelligent fellas, but great runners with the ball, and they're very unassuming. You know, like Ryan Taylor and David Fitz, you know, like they'll be the first to tell you, you know, that they probably struggled at underage. You know, neither of them were superstars. Davy obviously had his struggles coming through and making the breakthrough in the senior team, but like, you know, I've often said this before, that lads sometimes only come into their prime at 25, you know, when they realise that they're physically and mentally ready to maybe take it on at intercounty level. And these lads are playing phenomenal stuff. Like, and Ryan Taylor has been, like, arguably probably the best hurler in the Munster Championship so far, because like he's the amount of balls he's got on, even against Tipperary. You know, I just remember him winning 3 frees in a row in the second half, running down the sideline when Clare were under pressure and being cleaned out of it. You know, so he's got stronger too to be able to take them challenges. And that little one where, like, he's going to get killed one of the days if he flicks the ball over somebody's head, you know, going 100 miles an hour. I just worry that somebody's going to come and clean him out.
I loved his celebration after, when he won the free at the very end as well. You could just see what it meant, and the energy though and mobility that you have. You have a mobility and a robustness to you, Colin, that makes you so, like, you match up perfect to Limerick in that sense. But then you have your Dave Fitzgeralds and these boys that are able to punish. Tony Kelly's able to punish from distance as well. And like Duggan had no right to even get a shot away for that. He had no right to get the ball even for that goal chance. Now Nicky Quaid will definitely be disappointed with some of the saves he pulled off earlier in the night were outrageous. But that was probably one that got away from him. And there was a fair press on his puck out as well. You refused to allow them to build from the puck out, would be fair to say, the whole night.
Yeah, well, like when you've players like Barry Nash, like you can't give Barry Nash a puck out. Like it has been seen that they have no problem working the ball through the lines, and stuff like that. Like and I suppose we can match up. Diarmuid Ryan and Dave McInerney. They want ball down on top of them. They want like. And you could see that they were a step outside John. They were able to kind of read the play, and not leave the spaces there. But you can really only do that when you have the athleticism to maybe cover or match up against them. But like from looking at like Clare, you're just saying there, Michael, that Clare match up really well against Limerick. But like my worry then is against Cork when the game just opens up completely where we'd be, and you see like the game like the Cork and Waterford game was like a completely different like sport nearly, in a sense, because like the spaces and the openness in it, like from just watching it was just crazy. Like there was Cork lads with 35 yards of space, with nobody around him, and that could have come down to maybe the confusion of not having Tadhg de Burca there. And I know they mentioned this on the game last night about like how Jack Fagan doesn't really know how to play that role as well as Tadhg de Burca, probably sitting a bit deeper, and the lack of communication. But Cork can do that to you. They can stretch you, and really have you at 6s and 7s, and that's where like that'll be a test of a Clare team. How they cope with something like that and how they turn that into, because physically they can match. There's probably 2 teams in the country that can match with Limerick, and that's probably Kilkenny and Clare at the minute, in terms of their robustness and physicality. And Tip will probably get there. I just think it's probably a year early. I think for maybe Liam Cahill's project, he's trying to go down that route of developing that type of a team that will come at you. But then Cork in a one-off game can absolutely rip you apart, if they get on a roll. But I suppose Cork's consistency is their big problem at the minute that they need to get on top of.
Just that's a fascinating thing as well. It's just how different teams play. That Clare match up so well with Limerick. Cork play a completely different style, and you're just thinking, potentially for Cork, if someone else takes out Limerick, could Cork win All Ireland? But can they actually go and beat Limerick is another story. I think we were chatting about with Shano the other day on the show as well about like how do Cork prepare for Limerick when they don't, they play a completely different style. They've completely different players. They don't have those physical kind of players, and I just think there's a couple of nice different styles in the championship at the moment, and I think a lot of different teams, some teams can't beat Limerick, but they can beat all the other teams, if you get me as well. I think that's fascinating for the coming months.
Yeah, there's a couple of other points to bring up from the game the other day. Eibhear Quilligan coming in and going into the goal, that was a big call to drop Eamon Foodie, who'd obviously look a mistake. I mean, I'd only fully blame him for the second goal that when Jake Morris robbed him. The sideline one, a little bit unfortunate. After that, I think John Conlon should have controlled the ball that went out for the other goal. But anyway, he dropped him, even though his puck outs were great. Quilligan came in, did pretty well. Another point I'd make is, again, the half-back line with Clare, like Diarmuid Ryan and David McInerney taking on shots too often, I would feel, again, when they could pop the ball to all the talent they have in front of them. And Diarmuid Ryan had 3 fouls and converted scores, or maybe even 4, so just probably... I know there's one thing where you're trying to go balls to the wall to get the ball, but there's discipline as well at the far side. And then finally, the free taking with Limerick. This seems to be becoming an issue now, Colin. Obviously, you took them for years. Is it becoming a bit of an issue for them?
I wouldn't have thought so. Like, you look at Aaron Gillane and you think like, he's probably one of the best free takers in the last number of years. Like, are the distractions of what's happening, like, is he a bit off? It's very hard to know, like, in terms of, you can only imagine that he's putting in the same practice that he has done, throughout the years. Like, and you can, sometimes it comes down to a confidence team when maybe the team isn't going that well and the pressure of a free is more, that like you're in tighter games and, they've maybe come under a small bit more pressure and the team isn't as confident maybe, but like doesn't seem to be affecting Diarmuid Burns anyway that much. He's a machine in terms of like, hitting frees and stuff like that. But it probably is just something that's stemming from maybe Limerick not being at full tilt, a confidence thing. Aaron himself probably isn't, hurling as free flowing as, what he has been in recent years. Seamus Flanagan seems to be the one who's carrying that forward line a small bit. Even Peter Casey isn't probably playing as well as, now I know he had a great game against Waterford, I suppose, but like Adam Hogan did a great job on him, I thought, the other night. You have to follow him. He's that type of a player that'll sneak into gaps and holes and watch the game play out and link a lot of plays. So it takes a lot of, I suppose, unselfishness to be able to mark somebody like that, because you have to be nearly not concentrating on the ball. You have to nearly go like, I'm not going to hit it, and be happy with that and accept it, that I'm going to stay out here and mark him. It's a small bit like marking Tony Kelly, like Cathal Barrett the last day. You nearly need to say, like, I'm happy to not hit the ball, because he's going to drift in around, because the minute you go for a ball, Peter Casey or a Tony Kelly type of player will see that and will drift somewhere else, and be able to get on. But you say there about matching up against teams, but Tony seems to do really well against Limerick, because again, they don't pick him up, as a man marker, and I know he carried in an ankle injury to the Tip game. He was unfortunate. I suppose Tony's ankles have been, his ankle injury has been probably a big hindrance to him in the last number of years. And to know what he's putting his body through to tug out for Clare, he's the type of person that probably needs a complete rest, probably surgery on that ankle. But he's worried, I'd say, that if he does get it, that, it could be out for a long period of time. So I think people sometimes underestimate how much these lads put their body through, to get out in a Clare jersey, and Tony, it means an awful lot to him. But then when lads think he's a bad game, they don't realise what he's actually going through, or, stuff like that. So you could see that was obviously released an awful lot more against Limerick, and he was more mobile and he was moving around the place a lot better. And you could see he was even confident in his own movement himself. Yeah,
giving Cathal Barrett no credit is what I'm hearing here.
I know. Listen, I've been around Cathal Barrett long enough now, I'll tell you, to know that he's an absolute nuisance. So it's hard to mark.
So, moving forward for Limerick, not starting Gerard Hegarty. Obviously, Colin O'Neill's an excellent player and all that kind of stuff. But, I found that interesting that they didn't start a guy who has delivered for them so often over the years. And I don't know, maybe Kylie's trying to send out a message. What did you make of that?
I thought that was unusual too. Gerard has been their go-to kind of, leader, I suppose, really, when in their forward line when things have been bad. But, maybe he was just, you see, I suppose, where do you get that competitive edge in your panel? If you're not going to, they've given all these lads a chance in the league, and then suddenly they don't play them in the first round of the Munster Championship. And then if they go poorly and you don't play them again in the second round of the Munster Championship, does that mean that these lads are just going to ease off, and kind of not be competitive in training and not be given, everything, and I've been there in panels before, where lads know they're going to be subs, they know they're not going to get game time, and suddenly, it drops off, and training then really suffers. So, I think it might have been, a point to prove maybe with management that, we need to give somebody a run here and show that there is something's going to happen if you don't play badly. But it's hard to know whether it was a kind of a mark on Gerard Hegarty in terms of what he did to get sent off the previous week. I thought that was a very, very foolish yellow card. I actually thought it could have been a straight red. I thought it was worse than Seamus Flanagan's. I thought he completely sideswiped the Waterford player when the ball was, well gone. And I think he'd have been well within his rights to give him a red card. And I suppose it has happened maybe once too many times, maybe for John Kiley's liking, that he's put them in that position. And when they're vulnerable like that, they can't go down to 14. And maybe he was a small bit worried about that. But it doesn't kind of, I suppose, listen, you're looking for every kind of help in Limerick to see that things aren't going well, but it doesn't read well for them. If you're being honest, it reads that they've been perfection, the last 4 or 5 years. Everything is, every decision they've made has gone well. So it's hard to know what's there at the minute, and, how they're going to react to it.
Yeah, just I'll throw it over to you, Michael, but David Byrne says on Twitter, tip Limerick in a few weeks' time now is going to be absolutely massive. Not good for Limerick that Cork clocked up a big points difference against Waterford yesterday. Could easily come down to score difference at the end of the round robin. And just another thing before I throw it to you, Michael, is Davy Fitz matching up with Kyle Hayes. It's great that Clare have an absolute giant to match up with him, and Hayes was still very good, but you need to pick out a couple of those athletes and say, right, they're not going to destroy us. But go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, no, just on John Kiley, I actually think Kiley was right to leave Hegarty off, because I think what he did against Waterford nearly made him a bit of a liability, and a bit of a liability to himself and to his team. And even the way he was remonstrating as he was coming off, and he was trying to explain to Kylie what was after happening, just not really the Limerick way. He mightn't have got the reaction. I thought he'd get a massive reaction from Hegarty when he came on and came into the game on Saturday. He didn't really, but as you say there, Colin, I do, like we're saying, Limerick haven't changed their starting 15 really since 2018. You know, they mixed it up the other night. They left a hurler of the year on the bench, gave Cottle O'Neill a chance. Maybe didn't get the bounce that they probably thought they would have out of it, but fascinating to see how they manage that 3 weeks now. Are they able to get Finn and Lynch back in the field? I think Lynch, I don't think it was a bad hamstring tear like he did against Waterford last year, but he still probably popped it or felt it tighten in a small bit. He'll probably be under pressure. Sean Finn will probably be under pressure too. I think it was his knee, and all of a sudden we're going to have to see all these guys that were saying, yeah, they have a great squad, they go into the squad, but guys that were coming on for 10 or 15 minutes are going to have to start games now. And then other guys are going to have to go deeper into their squad to finish it out. Now, they do have Shane O'Brien back available, and Adam English should be back available. They were both with the 20s, but there's question marks around Limerick now, and that's what we want. We were going into the Munster Championship, lads, in the All-Ireland thinking that, like John Mullane said a couple of weeks ago, that you might as well just hand Limerick the title. And that's what people were thinking. And it's far from that now at the moment, and that's what we want.
Well, going back to that though, you're talking like I always say like that this Limerick team is a real generational group of players that came through together. You know, they were beneficiaries of the changing of the academy in Limerick. You know, and how they professionalism and the way they coached and how they set up and stuff like that. But the difference between this Limerick team and the Kilkenny team, who, you know, won so many down through the years, was Brian Cody. Like, they had players coming every year. You know, there was nearly a new player that could have been an all-star, you know, in that Kilkenny team every year. You know, they were just really good at introducing, you know, a bolter or two bolters every year. It was never the same team. Whereas my only concern with this Limerick team is it has been, you know, the same players that have won them the All-Ireland the first time, and they're still counting on them. And, like, they just don't have the replacements there because these lads were so powerful. Like, you're never going to get an athlete like Garrod Hegarty again. You know, like, and, you know, it's going to be a long time before he does. Cian Lynch, an absolute magician, but injuries are, you know, causing a bit of a problem for him, you know, the last couple of years. Like, these lads have been through the ringer, but they don't have the replacements coming through behind them that are, you know, pushing them on. And that's the big difference between this Limerick team and the Kilkenny team, you know, that were so successful. And that's how it really is hard to win so many of these. You know, Limerick are really making hay for what they have. You know, they're like, you have to commend them for that. That, like, when they have this generational group of players, they're winning as much as they can. But I don't think the conveyor belt is there the same way that maybe the traditional Kilkenny was. You know, or Tipperary, for instance, that they have the flow of players that are coming through after it.
Yeah, just Tip never did back-to-back, of course, before Verney brings it in there.
I wasn't actually going to, but you're in that sort of situation where you know we're going to hop all over you.
It's paranoid.
Get it in first, yeah.